Where does the history of the house begin, which looks like a French chateau from the Renaissance era, but stands not in France, but on the rocky shore of the Atlantic in the state of Rhode Island? And why did the mansion, built for a sum equal to the annual budgets of small towns at the time, become a burden just a few decades later, from which the family decided to rid itself? None of the guests who once stepped into the grand hall of Ochre Court knew that its creator, Ogden Goelet, born not in a palace, but in a simple, though prosperous, New York family of the mid-19th century, had conceived not just a summer home. He had conceived a statement, possibly the loudest one in his life. Contrast pursues this story from the first steps. The man who spent his entire career among the high numbers of financial reports and bustling deals on Manhattan dreamed of a house where every tower and every spire would speak not of money, but of culture, of status, of belonging to the European tradition, which in the United States of America at the end of the 19th century, they were only just learning to imitate. And no one knew that this dream would become too heavy for his heirs. When in the 88th year of the 19th century, Ogden invited architect Richard Morris Hunt, the most influential master of the era, to the project, it seemed impossible that the client intended to turn the coastal plot into a copy of a French chateau, and not a stylized one, but precise down to the last cornice. Hunt, a student of the Paris School of Fine Arts, saw in this a challenge and an opportunity. Thus began the story that connected two worlds: American new money and the dream of genuine European aristocracy. The character of the first act is Ogden Goelet, a reserved, far-sighted man, almost ascetic in everyday life, but incredibly ambitious in public steps, a financier who preferred to remain silent where others loudly proclaimed themselves. He believed in numbers and land, in real estate and city development, but one trait distinguished him from other representatives of the Gilded Age. He wanted to leave a mark not in the Stock Exchange Chronicle, but in Newport's architectural line, a mark that would be visible from the sea. And yet, what pushed him to such a grandiose construction? Here arises the first shadow of future tragedy. Goelet built the house not for himself alone, but for the family and for what he considered a legacy. And it is this legacy that half a century later will become impossible to preserve. But the viewer does not know this yet. He sees only the beginning. Blocks of Con limestone arrive on the coast. The steel frame, hidden under the cladding, rises above the ocean. Local residents watch as the American billionaire makes the French Renaissance grow on the rocks of Newport. To understand why Ogden Goelet saw what other millionaires of his time did not notice, one must return to his roots. The Goelet family formed their fortune as early as the first half of the 19th century through real estate on Manhattan. These were not heirs of aristocracy, but practical investors whose wealth grew not from fashionability, but from calculation. They bought land when others were buying gold. And this philosophy, quiet, rational, almost emotionless, shaped Ogden's world from childhood. He saw how capital power is created, which is built not on shine, but on possession of space and time. But it was precisely this philosophy that gave rise to an internal conflict. In the era when American new money sought to prove their cultural sophistication to Europe, Goelet felt himself simultaneously both part of this wave and its critic. He was ambitious, but not boastful, sought recognition, but avoided scandals, invested millions, but himself led a life far from ostentation. His strategy for overcoming obstacles was always rational: preserve land, invest in the indestructible, choose stability where others rushed into risk. In 1886, when he began to think about a summer home in Newport, his influence in financial circles was already enormous. But Goelet saw the world differently than most entrepreneurs in his circle. For them, Newport was a stage. For him, a laboratory of cultural formation. And this became the first unexpected revelation. He was building not just a villa, he was building an architectural thesis that American wealth could possess the same aesthetic weight as European dynasties. The social conflict was obvious. Old New York families, those whose origins went back to the 18th century, looked at new money with cold condescension. Goulet belonged to those who caused anxiety and envy simultaneously. Their family's wealth was new, but dangerously growing, and this disrupted the usual social order. He knew that his family would not be accepted into the old elite solely due to capital. He needed a symbol, and this symbol was to be the house. And yet Goulet himself was inwardly contradictory. In letters mentioned as testimonies of the era, he is characterized by contemporaries as a closed man, but surprisingly subtle in aesthetic matters. A calculating developer who could discuss the stone carving of French castles as detailedly as market quotations. He wanted to give cultural volume to his name, and at the same time, he himself remained a shadow, a man who rarely appeared in public, but created projects that sounded louder than himself. By the end of the 1880s of the 19th century, he makes a decision that will change not only his life, but the silhouette of the entire coastal Newport. He invites Richard Morris Hunt, the very architect who later built the breakers for the Vanderbilts. The choice of Hunt is not luxury, it is philosophy. Hunt was an American raised by Europe, a man who understood the language of the Loire castles not as stylization, but as a cultural system. And here two worldviews, the practical investors and the aesthetically educated architects, collided and merged. This union will bring Ochre Court to the world. Goulet sought not to demonstrate wealth, but to create cultural legitimacy. He saw in architecture a tool of social affirmation, and therefore his house would look older than the state itself in which it stood. When Hunt first ascended the coastal plot chosen by Goulet, the sea roared so loudly that words were lost before they could reach the interlocutor. The rocks, eroded by wind and salt water, seemed to resist any human intervention. But it was precisely in this harshness that Hunt saw what distinguished Goulet's project from all others. The house was to not adorn the land, but to argue with it. To be not just a fortress of luxury, but a monument of will. Their collaboration was never simple. Goulet interfered in details that other magnates would consider trifles. He demanded that the windows be oriented not only for the best view, but under that angle which would ensure the play of light, reminiscent of the French chateaux he studied in albums. He asked to increase the height of certain halls by several inches for the breadth of space. At first glance, this could be capriciousness, but Hunt quickly enough understood the client doesn't act impulsively. He pursues an image that exists only in his head, a multi-layered image composed of memories, ambitions, and possibly a sense of incomplete belonging to that world to which he aspired. The construction of Ochre Court became a theater of tensions. Engineers argued with artists, stonemasons with decorators. Goulet, contrary to his introverted nature, personally walked around the construction site. He walked on the wet concrete in heavy coats, made notes in his notebook, stopped, raising his head to the future towers, as if verifying them against an internal standard. He never raised his voice, but his silence, his barely noticeable gestures were stronger than the loud instructions of other clients. It was then that the workers began telling each other stories about how this house was intended not for luxury, but for eternity. That perhaps Goulet was building a mausoleum for his own family name, a castle that should outlive more than one owner and become something like an American dynastic citadel. Of course, these were fabrications, but in these fabrications, truth was felt. Ochre Court was indeed conceived as something more than a house. When by the end of the 1880s the construction entered its decisive phase, Goulet was going through a difficult period. His health was deteriorating. He tired faster than usual. But no one, not even his close ones, suspected that he would not see his house in its final glory. He saw the blueprints, saw the rising walls, saw the first finished interiors, but did not see the ceremonial completion. And this became a tragic turn, an invisible crack in the foundation that he had so carefully erected. After his death, the house passed to the heirs. And here the conflict is revealed, which seemed to have been inscribed in the mansion's fate in advance. He who dreamed of eternity left no heirs ready to wage the same struggle. The family respected his memory, but did not share his passions. For them, Ochre Court was huge, expensive, demanding. Too demanding. And yet the house stood. It towered over the ocean like a giant born from one man's ambition. And it was precisely at this moment that the next character steps onto the stage, the world changing faster than anyone could expect. The 20th century was already knocking at the gates, and with it came changes that would overturn the fate of Ochre Court as radically as the waves overturn the stones at its base. By the beginning of the new century, Ochre Court was no longer just a house. It had become a landscape, a separate reality that the Gilded family maintained more out of duty than out of love. The towers shone on sunny days like polished amber, but inside there was a silence thick as dust on the balustrades. The house, conceived as a symbol of eternity, proved too large for living people. It demanded attention, strength, money, and most importantly, that very obsession which Ogden had, but which was not passed on to his heirs. As the country entered an era of rapid changes, Newport was losing its former role. The theatrical luxury of the Gilded Age seemed outdated, almost naive. Owners of neighboring mansions left for Europe, sold plots, curtailed seasonal balls. The world was becoming modern, pragmatic, noisy, and houses like Ochre Court seemed like relics of a civilization built on dreams that no one wanted to sustain anymore. And the Millionaires gradually realized, fighting this world is pointless. They maintained the house out of respect for their father's memory, but beneath this respect lived fatigue. Every winter brought new cracks in the walls, every summer, bills that grew faster than they could explain. The house required restorations, specialists, stonemasons, who were becoming fewer and fewer. It lived its own life, and the family, its own, and these two lives were diverging further and further. By the 30s of the 20th century, it became clear. Ochre Court, an expensive miracle that had lost its purpose. It was then that the thought arose, which no one would have dared to utter in Ogden's presence. The house must find a new owner, not just a buyer, but one who could breathe meaning into it. And it was precisely at this moment that Salve Regina College stepped onto the stage, a small Catholic educational institution seeking a place for expansion. The decision was heavy, almost tormenting. Selling the house meant admitting Ogden's dream was too great for the family, but perhaps not too great for the world. By transferring Ochre Court to the college, the heirs seemed to return to the house its right to a future. The house ceased to be a monument to private ambition and became part of living culture, the very one Ogden had so aspired to touch. And in this lay the paradox. Only by losing the house did the family save it. When the doors of Ochre Court first opened for students and faculty of Salve Regina College, the house seemed to sigh after long stupor. Corridors, along which for decades only servants and rare family guests had walked, filled with a different sound: footsteps, voices, laughter, the rustle of books. The Atlantic wind, always penetrating through the cracks of old frames, for the first time did not seem alien. It mingled with life rather than stifling it. The transformation was neither quick nor easy. The college received not just a majestic building in inheritance, but a titanic responsibility. Every tower, every arch, every capricious detail of French carving demanded care. And yet the new owner had what the Guelets lacked: not personal attachment, but a common goal. For the educational institution, the house became not a whim, but a mission. Within these walls, people were now to learn, think, grow, argue, all that creates the culture of which Ogden dreamed. Halls where balls were once held turned into classrooms. The spacious library, conceived by Gilded as a place of contemplation, filled with work tables. Even the grand staircase, a symbol of aristocratic pomp, became simply part of the students' route between classes. But this was the new beauty. Ochre Court ceased to be a decoration. It became a space where the past and future could exist without struggle. When the college began restoration, specialists discovered numerous hidden defects. Salt penetrated the stone, wood in some floor beams was eaten away by time, the roof required major renewal. The old house seemed to show the scars of its century-long existence, but for the first time in a long while, these scars did not frighten. They were a task, and tasks can be solved. Professors of architectural history led students through the halls, telling about Hunt, about French influence, about the strange ambition of the American Renaissance. Musicians rehearsed under the high vaults, and the sound reflected off the stone walls so purely that it seemed the house itself was listening. Late lights lit up in the windows, and Ochre Court, which under the Gildeds had frozen in museum silence, finally lived its evenings not in solitude, but in motion. Gradually, the mansion turned into a symbol not of wealth, but of resilience. It proved that architecture can live not only thanks to capitals, but thanks to people who find meaning in it. And although the Millionaires had long left Newport, the memory of his dream continued to resonate in lectures, in student footsteps, in the ritual echo of old corridors. Thus, the house created as a private fortress became a home for all. But any new life, even the most inspiring, soon faces a test. For Ochre Court, such a test became the years of rapid growth of Salve Regina College. By the mid-60s, the administration understood. The beautiful but capricious mansion could not cope with the influx of students. It was created for a family of several people and their servants, not for hundreds of young people who daily opened and closed heavy doors, walked on marble staircases, used the heating system barely designed for previous loads. The house was tiring. This was a new, almost philosophical crisis. The college could not abandon Ochre Court. It was the heart of the campus, its symbol, its history. But leaving everything as is was also impossible. Time demanded practicality. It was precisely this dilemma that became the moment of internal turning point. The mansion was no longer considered as a museum of architecture. It was becoming part of the educational machine, where every square meter had to work. Then began a large-scale rethinking of the building's role. The administration decided only what is used can be preserved, and Ochre Court, contrary to its aristocratic nature, began to adapt. Basements were reinforced, old utilities replaced, some halls repurposed for the needs of faculties. But at the same time, every restoration was accompanied by architectural historians. It was impossible to allow practicality to destroy the essence. This era became the moment of true transition. If for Ogden Gourlay the mansion was a demonstration of American wealth, then for the college it was turning into a tool for transmitting knowledge. And in this transition, a new truth was revealed. Greatness can be preserved not through luxury but through meaning. The house, which once cost the family a fortune, acquired value of a different order, not financial, but cultural. Interestingly, it was precisely in these years that many began to look anew at Gilded's own history. Professors explained to students the fact that the family could not hold on to Ochre Court was not a defeat. It was a reflection of the era when private fortunes could no longer compete with society's needs. And therefore, Douglas Gilded's decision to donate the house now seemed not a gesture of despair, but a gesture of foresight. Thus, the mansion survived its main crisis, acquiring new meaning. It became that rare example when architecture does not die after losing its owner, but, on the contrary, flourishes when falling into the hands of those who see in it not a memory of luxury, but the foundation of the future. When you enter Ochre Court early in the morning, still before the campus wakes up, the house seems almost unreal. Through the high stained glass windows, cold Atlantic light falls on the marble floor, and in this shaky silence, it is hard to believe that the building once served not a public purpose, but a personal affirmation of wealth. Now student footsteps, echoes of lectures, and the rustle of pages have replaced the silks of the Gaulet's guests. And yet the house did not lose its dignity. It seemed to have reconciled with its new role, but did not lose the grandeur that Richard Morris Hunt bestowed upon it. This metamorphosis is the most unexpected conclusion to the entire story. The mansion, created as a demonstrative symbol of private power, became the bearer of a completely different idea. Today it embodies a legacy that lives not through ownership, but through transmission. Here they hold ceremonies for the opening of the academic year. Here thesis defenses take place. Here, under ceilings covered with French motifs, students make their first scientific discoveries. Many of them do not even know about the Gaulet's, but the house becomes part of their biography, quiet but noticeable. And this recognition is perhaps greater than any balls and receptions of which Newport was proud a century ago. If one looks back at the path of Ochre Court, it reveals an almost literary structure. Like in the story of Gatsby, where the luxurious house turned out to be built for a dream, not for life, so in the fate of the Gaulets a symbolic rhythm appears. Ogden Gaulet created an architectural manifesto of the era of American fortunes, but the dream of immutable greatness collided with harsh reality. The house turned out to be larger than the families that built it. However, unlike the fictional Gatsby, here the story does not end in emptiness. The house did not sink to the bottom of time. It did not fade into oblivion. It changed its meaning. And it is precisely in the change of meaning, the main lesson of the story. Ambitions pass, private fortunes dissolve. Dynasties are forgotten, but architecture, art, and education outlive all this if they fall into the hands of those who see in them a resource, not luxury. When Douglas Gaulet transferred Ochre Court to the college in the 39th year, this step seemed forced. But today it reads as foresight, a rare example of how private legacy can become public property without losing its beauty. It is interesting to observe how two times coexist in the house. In the grand hall where French music once sounded, student concerts now take place. On the grand staircase, down which ladies in velvet dresses once descended, someone now hurries to an exam. In the library conceived by Gaulet as a place for reflection, students search for books for research papers, and the house accepts all this without resistance. It seems to understand that the new life does not destroy it, it prolongs its breath. But the most amazing thing is how Ochre Court ceased to be a symbol of elitism and became a symbol of resilience. It survived the era of industrial capitals, survived economic crises, survived the change of generations and educational models. It became proof that legacy does not have to be fragile. It is fragile only when tied to one person. But when transferred to society, it becomes stronger. Historians have not left direct evidence that Ogden himself dreamed of such an ending. His letters and documents do not contain prophetic phrases about the house's future. But the fact remains, his creation turned out to be part of something much larger than a dynasty. The house which the family could not hold on to for themselves, society preserved for the future. Its walls now serve not the ambitions of one generation, but the path of many. And in this, perhaps, the most mature form of victory is manifested. a victory not over people and not over circumstances, but over time. Perhaps Ochre Court was not a forgotten French chateau that American millionaires could not afford for themselves. Rather, it was a grandeur that needed to find the right meaning. And it found it.